You can change the world. You can change the world with your presentation, your speeches, and your stories. That is what a public speaker and a trainer, Nancy Duarte, said. You can change the world. Clearly, she has never been to a Toastmasters meeting. How many lives did we change with our speeches today? How many lives do we change every week when we come here? Not sure, yes? Let me come back to that point. But she is right. A speech can change the world. And just to show you some example of the speeches that have changed many, many lives, and you can say the history of the world, let me share. I Have a Dream by Martin Luther King on that fateful day in Washington, D.C., when he came on stage and talked to those thousands and thousands of people that were protesting for the civil rights movement. I Have a Dream changed the way civil rights movement is remembered. And so do we remember his speech and him. Winston Churchill. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and the street. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender. The speech he gave to the parliament when they finally decided to get fully into the war against Nazi Germany. To fight for their lives, to fight for Europe, to fight for the world. That speech changed the world. A bit more far behind in the history. Abraham Lincoln, during the Civil War, Gettysburg Address, 2-minute speech that changed the course of that war, as well American history, and if you consider American history to be influencing on the world history, that this nation under the God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from this world. Those speeches changed the world. So if those speeches can change the world, why don't our speeches change the world in Toastmasters that we give every week? Or we give in our work? Or do we give in our communities? What is the difference between those speeches and the speeches we give? Well, there is one big difference. Those guys were amazing. They were amazing speakers. This was not their first time coming on stage and talking to so many people about a cause they really believed in. They had done it many times in the past, and on that day they were prepared to deliver whatever was needed to be said. That's the difference between them and between us. But we are in a good place because we are here to do what? To speak, to practice. We are practicing all those skills that we need to one day make that speech. And you know what? It may sound a bit grandiose of me to share this dream, but I have a dream. I have a dream. I'm standing there, I had a dream that one day I will also give a speech which can be included in the list I just shared. That one day I will give a speech that can be included in that list because it changed the world, it changed people's life, it made a difference. Now why do I think that I can do it? Well, if they can do it, I can do it. They worked for their dreams. They worked for that moment. And that's why they were able to do it. And we all have causes we believe in. We all have things to say. That's never the problem. The problem has always been how to say it. So today I would like to share 3 tools that so far I have found to be extremely useful whenever you're speaking. No matter if it's your work, if it's in Toastmasters, if it's in your communities, these tools can help you to make a difference. And later on, after I have shared those tools, I will share a couple of stories where I think that actually the speeches you have heard, maybe in Toastmasters, maybe somewhere else, that you think didn't change the world, but they in fact did. But first, the tools. The most important tool that you need to have as a speaker is to be silent, to not say anything. It's counterintuitive. Why would you stop talking when you are there to speak? But actually silence, the pauses, are extremely, extremely important. If you would have seen Martin Luther King's speech, an average speaker speaks at the rate of about 130 to 150 words per minute. He gave that I have a dream part of the speech 100 words per minute. He was very slow, he took a lot of pause. But why do we need it? Where do we need to take a pause? Well, the most common place you need to do is humor. Whenever you're making a joke, there should be pause. Whenever there is a punch word or a punch line, you need to pause before, so that to prepare people that something is coming, and afterward for them to actually laugh and not talk over them while they're laughing. So humor is very important, and I know it from my experience. For some of you know that last year I took part in the humorous speech contest and I managed to reach district finals. So that means that I gave the same speech at 4 different places in front of 4 different audiences. And this year I wanted to see what worked in those speeches and what didn't. And as I was reviewing all those 4 videos, I realized that there was one joke where I talk about when you are on a date and how you should compliment your girlfriend. You should, for example, say that your sense of humor is amazing, even if it is not. This pause that comes between these 2 lines had different impact in all those 4 speeches. In the first 2 times, nobody laughed. Almost no one laughed at this joke. They didn't get it because the pause either was completely missing or was not prepared well. In the next one, the pause was perfect and there was a huge laughter. Almost everyone started to laugh at the same time. And the final one, it was slightly less because the pause was again not long enough before the punch word. Humor is all about pauses. The pause before the punch word, before the punchline, and afterwards. If you cannot master that pause, you cannot master humor. The second place where you should be using silence, pauses, is of course to get attention. Has it ever happened that you were speaking and suddenly nobody was listening to you, or maybe a couple of people were looking at their phone or talking to each other and you wanted to get their attention back? You know what is the best way to do it? Just stop doing anything. Stop doing anything, look at those people, and they will pay attention to you. What will go through their mind was, oh my god, there was a background noise going on behind me, but now it stopped. What happened? Maybe I should get out from my phone or stop talking to my friend to see what has happened there. And when they look at you, they see you looking at them, and you get their attention. The attention is back because now they know that you are looking at them, and they have to pay attention. The final one, of course, is emphasis. Every time you say something important in your speech, you have to take a pause. Before and after. Before, to prepare the audience that something important is coming, and after, to let them think, to let them understand it. This is very important to take a pause just before you say or after you say something important. The second tool, and this is something maybe you think is difficult as public speakers, but actually it's not, because you are all using it all the time. The first, this is of course rhetorical devices. The first rhetorical device that we all use and think is actually difficult to use is of course a metaphor. According to some research, in our daily language, when we are talking to our friends, our family, our colleagues, in 1 minute we use on average 6 metaphors. But somehow when we write our speeches, we don't use any metaphors. Maybe 1 in every speech or 2 in every speech we don't use. And just to give you an example from today, when Naveen was asked the question about what a leader should do, how did he answer? The leader is like a head, and his team is like their arms and legs, and he needs to know how he can use them. That's a metaphor to explain something with the help of something that you all know. That's an example, perfect example of a metaphor. And we use it all in daily life, all the time. But somehow in our speeches we tend to forget because we are writing them, or we think we were going to say it in a certain way. That's the wrong approach. Every time you have to explain something complicated, try to put it into a metaphor. The second one, you use it all the time, or at least in Toastmasters it's encouraged to use all the time. The triad, the group of three, using three words together, using three sentences together, having 3 points in your speeches. Everything where there is three, it all makes sense. If it is more than three, it becomes a list. If it is less than three, it has a different purpose. Few examples, famous example, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. That's the American Constitution or Declaration of Independence. We have the same version of that in Pakistan. It's called unity, faith, discipline. And I'm sure that there are many others, even in Christianity, Father, Son, and the Holy Trinity. You can find the triad in almost every place. Why? Because we are psychologically trying to understand it better. It makes us feel as if it is complete. Anything more and it starts to become like a list, and we don't like lists. When we have to remember a list, we never remember a list. And the final one is climax. This is also something we use, but sometimes we make a mistake. Every time you're using three, a triad, something of three words, three sentences, start from the weakest one and go to the strongest one. Life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. The strongest one is at the end. Big, bigger, biggest. You never say biggest, bigger, and big. You always say big, bigger, and biggest. You always say river, seas, and oceans. You never start with ocean, seas, and river, because it doesn't make any sense. People will realize it. You always want to start from the weakest point to the most complex one, or most stronger one. And these are the only three rhetorical devices that we use in our daily language, but if we would use more in our speeches, you would notice the difference of how people perceive your speech. The final one, and of course this is the third one, and of course this is the most important one, is our stories. It's the storytelling. Look at any great speech, look at any amazing speech even in Toastmasters, and they all contain stories. They all contain stories. Now, but how to come up with the right story for the right moment? There are a few techniques. It's not that simple. It does require a bit of work. So let me share, first of all, how to find your stories. And I think this is the easiest part. And I would need the help of Sergio here. Please come. If you want to find the stories in your life and you have thought that I have already told all the stories and none of them make any sense to be used in a speech, you're wrong, because they are still. Draw a graph like this. This is the height of happiness in your life, where you were ecstatic, everything was perfect. This is that part. This is the part where you were close to suicide, because your life was terrible, you were depressed, and you just want to die or kill someone else. That's the sad part. This is somewhere in the middle when everything is neutral. This point is the day you were born, and this point is today. Now I would give this marker to Sergio. You have to plot the graph of how your life went up and down, from happy to sad, throughout, from your birth till today, just in broad strokes. Not every.
Not that. It's not that. It's today.
No, it's today. You're not dying. And tell us what you are trying.
Happiness.
Okay, but what happened?
I was born.
Okay.
Had an amazing family
Okay.
who took care of me. Then I got some problems over here, and I went very down. Then I was like this for some time, till here, a little bit. Then I started going up. Show us. Sorry. Sorry, I'm not the president here today. And I started coming here. Then I came here.
What happened?
Why did you come here?
I don't know. I met my girlfriend. It was something important.
So say that. See how happy she is now.
Of course. Then here I met Zayn. Toastmasters, the presidency, and also some. Right now I'm here. Maybe here.
Okay, great. You had such a happy life, you never went down to sad, you know that?
No, this is sadness. But I'm not a very sad.
Yeah, you're not a very sad person. You have never
no,
faced
I'm okay.
depression. Yes. But you see every time something changes, every time there is a change in the graph, that's the story. Every time Sergio thought that his life went happy to sad or from sad to happy, that is a story. That is a story that you can tell, that you can use in your speeches to make a point, to make people laugh, to make people cry. This is how you find your stories. And I encourage all of you to do this kind of graph and list down all those stories. And if you still think that I cannot find, you can even narrow it down to a few places. So for example, if you're going to talk about Toastmasters, then maybe just talk about the day you joined Toastmasters until today and make a graph and find the stories from there. Because that will be relevant for that audience and on that speech. That's how easy it is to find speeches, find stories for your speeches. The second thing, once you have a story, how many times have you heard someone telling a story on stage, or maybe your friend telling you something interesting that happened in their life, but for you it was just so boring. So boring. Because it was not finishing, it was never coming to the point, it was just simply too long. It happens all the time, because generally we are not very good storytellers. We have stories, we like to tell them, but we are not good at it. But there are very few couple of things that we need to do to make it better. The first one is something called the structure of the speech, and just for easy to remember, it's CSI. CSI Miami, but no, not that one. Conflict, struggle, introspection. So every time Sergio was here, he must have faced a conflict. Something must have faced him right in his face, that something needs to be done. He must have gone through some kind of struggle, that's why he went so down. Struggles is where we are at our worst. This is where we need help. This is where we need someone to tell us where to go. And that's how you go out of it. And at the end of it, that's the most important step that we tend to miss. You have to look back. You have to look back at the story of your struggle and find the message, find the lesson. What did you learn? What did other people learn from your story? And that's the part which is called introspection. And these three things, just three elements, are a must. Go directly first to the conflict. Don't waste your time describing the prehistory of your story. Show us the struggle, how you dealt with it, and then tell us what the lesson you learned. That's the basic, simplest structure derived from the Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, but simplified into just 3 steps. The final thing, you have characters in your stories. You yourself probably are a character, but sometimes you will have other people in your stories. How do you describe to them? Well, name, looks, personalities. My name is Zain, I look like a Pakistani, and I'm a bit of a nerd. You tell these 3 things and already you know a bit more about my character than about anyone else. This is Sergio, he's always standing straight, and he is sometimes not very responsible. That's Sergio! That's an example, that's not true, but just an example. That's how you build characters in your stories. When you build characters in your stories and you follow that structure, you will have great stories to tell that will make an impact. Now, these were the tools, but there is one important thing that you still miss. You have the tools to deliver your message, you have the message, but there are going to come a moment in time where it will be important to deliver it perfectly. Churchill had that moment when Britain had to declare war and fight the Nazi Germany. Abraham Lincoln had that moment. He was ready all his life to give great speeches, and he had been giving, but he had that moment at Gettysburg Address where he had to say what he had to say, so we remember him. Same with Martin Luther King. He gave the same speech, I Have a Dream, just a couple of weeks before that one in some church because he was a pastor, and we don't remember that. If he would have never said the same speech on that day in Washington, probably we would not be talking about it today. Because there was a time for that speech where he just took the moment and made himself to be remembered to this day. Now I have a firm belief that we are all going to get such moments in our life, where we are going to get an opportunity to bring our message and share with everyone else, and it will be a grand moment. The only question is, will you be ready? But it doesn't always mean that you're going to talk to thousands and thousands of people, or you're going to lead a country and it's going to be a crunch moment and you have to make decisions. No, there are many other moments. And just to give you a couple of short examples of stories, have you listened to this speech by Steve Jobs?
Yeah.
For those of you who have not, this is the commencement address that he gave in 2005, long before there was an iPhone and long before Apple was what it is today. He talked about his failure in life, but more importantly, he talked about cancer. He was very honest. He told 3 stories. And I'm pretty sure that the people, hundreds of people that were sitting in that auditorium listening to him, or anyone that has watched that video on YouTube, must have felt his message. And for those people that have felt that message, he did change their lives. He did change their world for them with that one speech. But this is still Steve Jobs. You can say he was great, he of course had that moment and so on. Do you know this moment? Of course you know. About 1 year ago, a member of our club, Marek Gulanovsky, most of you know him, he is a guy who looks very serious all the time but is also very emotional and always tries to hide his emotions under a big dose of sarcastic humor. Or one of those days, he gave a speech right on this stage in Toastmasters where he talked about his experience of 9/11. Because he had been living in USA a few years earlier before it happened. And he had gone to World Trade Center, the viewing deck. And he had known that building. So when on the 9/11 he came back home and he saw on the TV what was happening, the thought that was going through his mind were the people that he saw on his trips. That man that was going to his work in the same elevator that he was taking to go up. That man that was just going down to eat his lunch at the restaurant as he was coming down from the tower. He thought about those people. And I was sitting in the audience. And as I was sitting in the audience, it reminded me of something else. It reminded me of such a terrible moment in the history of my country, which only happened like 2 years ago, on 14th of December in 2016. When terrorists came to a school that I have personally gave exams in, have visited, I know the uniform, I have been there in those halls. People came and started shooting, and 145 kids died in that school. I remember how I felt. But as I was listening to Marek and his experience of witnessing that thing in 9/11, I knew that Marek is the only person that truly understands how I felt on that day. Because we have been through similar experiences. That's how he changed my life. That's how he made me connect to him. And it didn't take a big, scary moment, grand moment for him to do it. He just had his own personal story and he shared, and maybe on that day in the whole audience only I felt like that, but even one person's life change means you changed a lot of lives. The final one is of course my story, and it is also from last year. I got an opportunity to go and give a speech in Buch at a conference. And the theme of that meeting was My City, My Passion. And someone suggested to me, why don't I talk about my experience in WrocLove? I have been living here for many years. And I thought that was a very good idea. So I prepared a speech called Home, about my experience of living in WrocLove for many years. And I talked about many things. I talked about all the good friends that I have made, how amazing the summer is, but also some bad things. And one of those bad things that I really talked about was something like this. I don't know if you remember or not, but the last time in the end of 2015, there was a huge wave of immigrants or refugees coming to Europe. And at the same time, there were elections happening in Poland. And I would go outside of my home, and this is a real picture that I took myself on a tram stop, which is a protest against immigrants. And these are very common. Of course, in the background you can see a mosque, so it was directly pointing to Muslims. Now, I felt threatened. I didn't feel safe. I didn't feel safe in the city that I love to live, where I have my friends, I have a good job. So much so that I remember perfectly when I ordered food to my home. And a guy came and delivered, and I opened the door, and of course it was a huge big guy with a bald head. And I took the food from him, but the thought that was going through my mind was, he must have seen my name, and my name is a pretty Muslim name. What if after his shift is done, he gets a couple of beers, then gets a couple of his friends, and decides to come to my place because he knows where I live, and beat the hell out of me. And I was so paranoid that I even came up with a plan how I'm going to escape such a situation. I created a plan that if he comes from that door, there is a window I'm going to open, jump here, go to the McDonald's that is right in front of my home, and I hope someone will protect me from there. That's how bad I felt for those few months while this situation was all the time in the news and there were protests. Now as I told that same story to, 100 people, I didn't think too much of it. I just thought I was sharing my story. Next day, one person from that audience, who is also a foreigner living in Bhuj, but from Ireland, he's not Muslim, but he came to me and he said, that's just not your story. That's the story of every foreigner in Poland. And you shared it so beautifully and it related so much to me, I could not have expressed it in the same way. So in that moment, my speech had an impact on him. Even one person can change the world. Now, you all can change the world. You all can change the world with your speeches, with your presentation, with your stories. And there is going to come a time, or it already has been, but there is going to come a grand moment where you are going to share your message. The only question is, will you be prepared?